Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, who's totally tapped in right now and definitely paying attention.
I'm live tweet. I'm live. You got me on Blue Sky. What? I don't even know. Am I live skying?
I don't know. There's been a conversation about what the posts should be called. The people who were like sort of grandfathered in over there were calling it, when the site was like basically functionally dead, skeets. And there are a whole a whole influx of people don't like that. So there's been the nomenclature is still to be determined, but I will say that the NBA community is growing over there. Producer Aaron said that absolutely cannot stick. I don't think so either, but I encourage everybody to go and join over there because it's got some momentum. People are talking about the NBA last night, Bill.
It's a cool vibe, man.
Yeah, it's a good vibe.
Yeah.
But also last night during the NBA Cup, there was just like a lot of people having a good time, which is where I want to start with you. Yesterday, I was discussing the NBA Cup with Sam. You guys flip-flopped your day. And Sam was like, I'm only sort of, he was only kind of like marginally interested. Yo, I'm full go on this thing now.
So, okay. I'm going to pull back the curtain on the selfishness of sports writers, how we just root for our own selfish best interests.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the Cup to work because I like going to Vegas. I'm going to Vegas this time. But if it fizzles, I won't go in the years ahead. But I was actually skeptical entering last night that I think it can work. And if you talk to people in the league office, they will tell you that they're committed to this long term, and their anticipation of it really mattering to fans is 5, 6, 7 years from now. They think that they're building something long term. And I'm sort of skeptical of that can happen if fans don't care. But you're right. I did a 180 last night because if the players care, and if they give a damn, and they give a damn, the very first sort of Cup games, it can't. You're right. It was fun. It was feisty. The games are better. This is what the league office wants. They want to incentivize guys to play more often. We've talked about that with the sort of thresholds for awards, and they want guys to compete when they're playing, even in November. I was with Sam yesterday, but I'm with you now. I think it's working.
I had a real good time last night. You and I might be the wrong people to check in on this because we're going to watch basketball and have a real good time anyway. But it just felt fun. The way that they had some storylines, by the way, super organic. Like the groups are randomized, Bill, and don't be cynical and skeptical that somehow that the fix was in to end up with Klay going to the Bay. That was just something that happened accidentally. Whoever did that, though, genius idea. We're going to get into later in the show some things about the Cup, why the first night was so fun. Also, last night, I think we cracked the code on this thing.
You and Aaron did. You guys.
But we have two really good ideas, one for the NBA regular season and one for the NBA Cup that could make it even better. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Joel Embiid returned last night, Bill. We'll discuss his season debut. Wasn't great. Eric Spoelstra had an absolute brain meltdown. We'll get into that. We'll also discuss Bill's latest story for CBSSports.com on the Bucks, and we'll do the team of the night. So many different options to choose from. But first, we're going to start with the obvious one. Klay returned to the Bay last night. The Mavs were at the Golden State Warriors. Awesome game. Warriors pull it out 121-17 because Steph went supernova at the end and scored the last 12 points for the Warriors, including a 10-0 run by himself where he was doing the night-night thing. And
it was amazing.
It was awesome. We should discuss Klay, though, right? Because he had a really good night. I mean, it's been a weird season for him, sort of up and down. Weird season for the Mavs, who we can get into in a little bit. But for him, individually, 22 points, 6 of 12 from 3, threw a little Steph Curry shimmy shake on one, which might have been poking the bear a little bit.
I liked it, though.
I did.
Yeah, he did poke the bear. You're right.
He did poke the bear. What they gave out captain's hats to everybody in the crowd because he used to drive his boat around the Bay. What did you make of Klay's return?
Yeah, and look, I think a lot of times those tributes are forced and feel kind of weird. And I'm in the arena for a lot of those, and that was I'm not crying, you're crying kind of moment, right? That was that. I mean, that's real love that he had for that organization, and a real bitterness in how he left. And my sort of overarching takeaway was that this is one of those breakups where in sports sometimes you just have to have the guts to move on from something that isn't working, even if you've invested a lot of money, or in this case, a lot of time, a lot of emotion. There's history, there's rings, there's championships. I mean, Klay Thompson is one of the 3 greatest Warriors in the history of the sport, full stop. I mean, but they had to move. And to me, I think it showcases that I'm not sure about the Mavs, but everybody won in the sense that I think Klay had to liberate himself from having to compete against the greatest hits version of Klay Thompson in a Warriors jersey. He's not that guy, especially defensively. Just athletically, he's not the guy that he used to be, but he can still contribute. And I think for Golden State, look, even though it was cool to honor him, and even though Klay had a really good game, and I think that was a season high 22 points for him, they are younger and deeper and more athletic because Klay Thompson's not there, which makes them a better basketball team. And in the end, watching Steph take over a game is a reminder that when the right guys are around Steph Curry and the right guys are there in Marcus Clay's not, I think the Warriors can still be a top 5 team in the NBA and maybe more of a contender than an actual contender, which I certainly didn't anticipate. So my takeaway was everybody wins. It's just a bigger win for the Warriors because Klay gets to go play. I think it's the best version of himself, liberated from having to be the old Klay Thompson. He's not, but the Warriors win just like they won last night. And that I think that the new pieces, John, I think it makes Golden State, because of what Steph is and what he was in that fourth quarter, I think it makes the Warriors what they used to be, which is, not a favorite, but they're good enough to do some real damage.
Pretty damn good. It tied his season high, Klay Thompson, with 22 points. Yeah, it was basically like one of his 2 best games this season because it hasn't been going great for him. Going into last night's game, he was shooting like 35.5% from 3. And you'll remember, of course, last year he started off slow and still shot 39% from 3. So sometimes, and I think it was 41% after the All-Star break. So it takes him a second to get going. But last night, there was really good vibes for him in the building. He got the standing ovation and he got the video and they gave him this huge, and it was like a minute long standing ovation when they introduced him. It was really cool. And it was great to see him play well because he has been scuffling a little bit. And I was like, I didn't want to see Klay lose the game and also play poorly. That would have been a bummer for the vibes. This was kind of like, from an entertainment standpoint, from a storyline standpoint, the best possible scenario for the NBA, right? Like Klay comes back, everybody loves him. He looks awesome. And oh, by the way, it looks like the Mavs might steal a win, but no, because here comes Steph Curry and Steph Curry goes crazy. And I'm watching that whole thing and it was just so entertaining. I had the HQ hits last night. And of course we were talking about Steph and Klay. And I was thinking about the product and I was wondering to myself, so all of us enjoyed it, but what do you think it was like for Klay to look at the Warriors succeeding without him, where they're 9-2 now, Bill, and the Mavs, it's not their fault. They lost a close one to KD, then they lost a close one to Joker, and now they lost a close one to Steph, and they're 5-6. They could easily be 7-3.
Their record's misleading.
7-4.
They've lost 3 in a row by I think a total of 6 points.
Yeah.
So So I think it motivated him. I mean, look, it's got to be painful. It's hard enough to leave your ex. It's pretty brutal when your ex thrives the minute that you're out of there, and that's exactly what's happening. And you hit on this. Klay's a vibes kind of player. He can be streaky. He was so down last year. Remember, his frustrations were really obvious, and I think it impacted his play. So even though the Warriors are clearly better without him, and they are, and even though he has seen that and then got a front row seat to it, ironically, last night in the game going back to the Bay where they honored him, he responded to it. He obviously played really, really well. And maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm hoping that because he's kind of a vibes player, that just playing well and playing well against his former team will instill him with a little bit of confidence and a little bit of swagger that he takes with him after this. Because when Klay gets on a tear, and to the second half of the season last year, the guy can be unbelievable. And I do think there's a confidence thing with Klay Thompson. I do think there were times last year where unhappy or miserable or doubting himself or maybe just frustrated that he's not the same player physically, it impacted him because he still has these scoring bursts. He can still play at a high level. So, yes, I think he absolutely was motivated by and is aware that this team is so much better without him, but he responded to it last night. And even though they lost the game, the way that he played, I'm hoping it's a little bit of a spark for him to be better and more consistent with the Mavs going forward.
It had to be such a bizarre, out of body, surreal experience for him after a career of being with Steph when Steph does those things, to be on the other side and to be victimized by your guy.
Yeah.
And even afterwards, in the post-game interview, Steph was immediately asked about Klay throwing the Curry shake shimmy. And he's like, yeah, he knows better. And he was saying it good naturedly. And obviously he was in good spirits. Steph was, because he won the game, but that's your guy who's now not your guy anymore. He's a competitor and he has to go home and take the L. That's got to be.
And Klay went at Steph early. I think the first play. I mean, like there was some, and Steph said afterwards that he sort of blacked out on the play. Mm-hmm. You're right. So this is what's the expression I'm going to butcher? No prophet is appreciated in their own hometown. It might be from Carnival. I don't know if it's the Bible or the HBO series about the Antichrist. It's one of the two. But the logic is
essentially the same thing.
The logic is the same. That sometimes it is easy to overlook and not fully appreciate greatness when you're around it every day, and to maybe confuse the sun, right? Like for the thing you're orbiting, for maybe I'm part of the glow. And he got a reminder yesterday that there are very few players in the history of the game and very few players in the sport now who are at that level. And Steph's one of them. And Klay probably knew it, but didn't fully appreciate the way in which he relied on Steph Curry for a lot of those accolades. It's not a shot at Klay. It's just don't do the Steph shimmy. Don't go at him on the first play. He should have all the people that should have known not to provoke Steph Curry. It's Klay Thompson. But sometimes you take for granted the greatness and the people around you until you're on the other side.
I will say that I took for granted Steph Curry's greatness coming into this season. We're going to do apologies tomorrow, early season apologies, things we got wrong. I'm excited to do that. One of the ones as a little preview here, as a little spoiler, I was so wrong about the Warriors. I thought like the window had closed. They went and got all these bit pieces. And I just thought it was too many role players. And Steve Kerr, when he was running out these deep rotations early in the season, I thought it was him just like casting about in the darkness, trying to find something that works. And he said early with confidence. And sometimes, coaches like, they pump themselves up, they pump up their team, right? It's like, it's coach speak. That's what I thought it was, where he was like, no, we've got real depth here and we're going to keep running these guys out there. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like you're going to be playing slow-mo and Gary Payton and Looney significant minutes down the stretch and Moody. I'm not buying it. Now I'm buying it. This is 9-2. It's legit.
Yeah.
I mean, especially coming off that road trip they just had. Conversely, as I mentioned, you lose a tight game to KD and the Suns. You lose a tight game to the Nuggets and Joker. You lose just an agonizingly tight game on the road that you think you're going to win. Looked like you were going to win last night in the Bay Area. Any concern about the Mavs? They're 5-6.
No, it's funny because I think I might owe them an apology, but can I give a 5-6 team an apology on an apology Thursday? No. So I'm not. Look, I don't think it's an overreaction to be really worried about the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't think it's an overreaction to be really impressed by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Mm-hmm. I don't even think it's an overreaction, notwithstanding what I wrote last week, to suddenly be worried about the Sixers. But I think the context of what's going on with Dallas is a little bit different. And you noted they've lost 3 close games. Again, if you add those games up, it's by a total of 6 points that they've lost. Kyrie and Luka have looked really good. I thought they looked. I mean, like Luka was a little inefficient, I think, last night. I don't have the box score in front of me, but whatever. He took a lot of shots. He scored some points. Klay played well. I think Dallas is going to be just fine, and that's before you consider the fact that you've got a New Orleans team we've talked about. It's on the scrap heap now because of injuries, and I think the Thunder are going to be okay, but that Chet injury is really, really significant. And I think we've established the Lakers are fine at 6-4, but I don't think they're great. There is some room,
offensively good, defensively not good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, JJ's done a nice job, right? Like they're more interesting on offense, but the roster is the roster. And I guess my point is, no, I think that the West is a little easier than maybe some people thought it would be, mostly because of the injuries, not harder. And I think Dallas will be just fine.
We're going to take a quick break. And then that was just like one game from last night, Bill, that we were super excited about. It was the nightcap. NBA Cup comes in hot. On the other side, we're going to continue our discussion of the first night of the NBA Cup, which includes, I guess, positively that he returned Joel Embiid, but negatively that it did not go well. We'll discuss that coming up. This is Beyond the Arc.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John Gonzalez and Bill Ryder here. Just a reminder that you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Please download, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you're listening on Spotify, You can leave us a comment on this episode. Just look below the play button on the Spotify app in full screen mode, and you can tell us what you think about the show, or leave us a question, or just praise the NBA Cup, which had another fun storyline last night. Again, totally organic that the Knicks and the Sixers, who had one of the best playoff series last year, first round, Knicks advanced, but it was super fun. Two regional rivals going at each other. They played last night, Joel Embiid's debut. The Knicks end up winning again in Philadelphia. They just own the Sixers in their building, 111-99. Joel Embiid, Bill, I know he's been out for a while. The guy hasn't played since the Olympics. He's got an injury. He's been investigated. All this stuff is always swirling around him. You would expect him to look rusty. He looked rusty. He looked slow. He looked winded. He had an ice pack on his knee at one point. He goes for 13 points. He only made 2 of 11 shots from the field. It wasn't great. They lost again.
So full disclosure, and this pissed me off, but it's the job. As you noted, I wrote a column on the Bucks, so I watched the Bucks game. I watched the entire Bucks pregame. I watched the Bucks postgame. Let me tell you, even in a win, not super happy vibe. So I was checking in on the Sixers game. So you saw more of it than I did, but in what I saw, he looked rough. And some of this is clips, some of this is checking in. They're doing highlights. It looked like he was pulling some of the same sort of floppy shenanigans.
Yeah.
But he was so off
was ever thus.
Rhythm. It was super obvious. It was just like, dude, you got to.
He was even rusty
on the nose.
He was even rusty at doing his floppy stuff. It wasn't great. I mean, early on, he was grabbing his knee. He went back in the locker room after his first shift. He comes out with an ice pack on it. He's scowling. Body language wasn't good. Now, his second stint was better after that. But I thought, look, they're 2-8, and the Eastern Conference isn't good, but it's getting late early for the Sixers, and they need Joel Embiid. Normally, if you go back and look at his games to start the season, his first games to start the season, he generally looks like this. It takes him a second to get moving, and then you're like, oh yeah, Joel Embiid is amazing at basketball. He's going to be fine. The Sixers are going to be fine. They don't have that much time this time around. They kind of need him to be great right away. And look, PG has been really good. He looked good last night. They've stumbled onto something here with Jared McCain, where he was kind of pressed into service because everybody else was bad, and Tyrese Maxey has a hamstring, has been out for a couple of weeks. He's a rotation player. They need to give that kid more minutes. He's really good. It's going to be hard for Nick Nurse to keep him out of the rotation. But that's not enough. They need Embiid to be Embiid. And last night, Cat was eating him. Like Cat was giving him all he could handle last night defensively. And I thought there were moments when Joe looked good defensively and was moving, and there was a couple chase down blocks and whatever, but you just need all of Embiid right away. And that was a fraction of him last night.
Yeah. My takeaway is in the unexpected hole that they're in and how it impacts and changes the plan they had for Embiid. And he hit on it after the game. After the game, he said that he wants to play back-to-backs, that he was just being a troll. He walked back this no back-to-backs comments that had gotten him in trouble. And my sort of take on this, because I had talked to some Sixers folks in the lead up to when they were in town, and when they were in town, their plan had been, before Maxey got hurt and before they kept losing games and got to that record you noted, their plan had been to have a doctor look at him every single day, and under the reality or the guise, whatever you think it is, it's probably more of a guise, of a doctor saying, oh, we got to rest him today. They were gonna sit Embiid a lot. He said the quiet part out loud about the back-to-backs that he probably wasn't supposed to. And I think that the takeaway from yesterday is there's just desperation now. There is no Tyrese Maxey. You're right. Paul George is playing well, but George was rusty his first game back. And so the plan had been, as I understand it, you get PG and Embiid back, and the message that Sixers executives were selling to me was it's going to take them a while to play together. Joel's going to probably sit anyway because we're going to be careful with him. We have to give this till December, January for these guys to really get in rhythm because of the time that Embiid may have to sit. And the message has changed. And I think that's the big problem, is that he's rusty and it doesn't matter. He's going to play back-to-backs. He's going to play games. They're going to have to force him out there more than they want because they, A, need him to play well so they can start winning now, and B, they need the Paul George Embiid tandem to work quickly because I think maybe they thought they'd be 4-6 or 5-5. Sure. They did not see this record, and I think that rough start is going to put more from him and from the team losing again. There's going to be pressure on Embiid to just get out there, however ready or rusty he is or isn't.
Yeah, that pressure is here already. The reason why he brought that up last night is because here we go. Here's a back-to-back. They got the Cavs tonight. Yep. I mean, it could not be a worse time to face the undefeated steamroll all the competition Cleveland Cavaliers.
You got to win. You can't lose it. You can't keep losing.
You can't keep losing these games. Now, Nick Nurse was asked about it, and he said that they were going to evaluate Embiid and PG today on whether or not they're going to play. As you said, Embiid said, look, I was kind of being a troll. I want to play if they'll let me play. The problem is it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. On the one hand, you do need to win. On the other hand, the whole purpose or idea or plan coming into the season was to make sure that Joel Embiid was healthy and not to play him in back-to-backs. But your record is kind of forcing your hand here. After the Cavs gets a slightly easier, although they're on a road trip. So you're gonna have the Magic at the Magic without Paolo. Then you're at the Heat, who we talked about their meltdown last night. We'll get into that a little bit later. And then you're at the Grizz without Ja. So it's not like the hardest schedule in the world, but you are also on the road. Here's the thing. This morning I woke up and I was like, man, they are screwed. The season is over. I don't see anything significant happening. And I got a text message from one of my Philly buddies. And he texted, the Sixers are 1 game out of last place, but they're 3 games out of 3rd place. So it's like, oh,
the East is bad outside of 2 teams.
It's saving them.
Look, I'm still of the mind that if I had to pick between the Bucks and the Sixers and who I think can salvage the season in the sense they can reclaim, well, I think what we all thought they would be, which is not Boston, but a top 4 or 5 team, it's Philly. The problem is the sort of margin for error and the ability to thread that needle is so small now that you can't have Embiid get hurt again and miss 10, 15 games. You can't. And you have to have Paul George and Joel Embiid figure out how to play together at a high level more quickly than we usually see. It took LeBron and Wade a while. I mean, just go down the list of guys that pair up. It always takes guys a long time for legitimate superstars to figure out how to play together. And it usually works, right? Even in New York, it's taking that game notwithstanding. It makes sense that it's going to take a while for Cat to kind of figure out how to make it work and vice versa. So I'm with your buddy. I think Philly can be fine. It's just with this start and with Maxey being out, you need some stuff to go right now that maybe you could have weathered before this, that maybe you could have talked me into, you could have been okay with if not for where we are at this point.
It's such a Sixers-y season, right? Like
you called it.
I was thinking about it. I was like, the start has been awful. They've played bad. The basketball is no good. Embiid is, nobody knows what they're getting out of him. He's injured. There's investigations. All of a sudden, people are pinning their hopes to their 1st-round draft pick developing into something. It's
I know you are.
It's a very Sixers-y season. Do you want to talk about the Knicks at all? They're 5-5 now, 2nd in offensive rating. Cat looked. He was distributing, offensively, he's been good. Defensively, he's been less good, although last night the returns were pretty good. I thought also Sam had brought up yesterday that Mikal Bridges hasn't looked that good. I thought he was pretty good last night. I'm less concerned about the Knicks.
I'm not either. I also don't, if the Sixers are bad, and they're bad right now, and if Embiid was a shell of himself, and he was, it is hard for me to draw any stark conclusion to say, wow, the Knicks winning that game is such a significant proof of A, B, or C for New York. I think it's proof they played the Philadelphia 76ers and Joel Embiid looked like he was 104 years old. But I'm with you. I know the East is bad, and I know almost no teams are over 500. I'm not worried about it as much. We know that Banchero got hurt, right? Like Orlando, like that's an injury thing. And we know that Cat's going to figure it out, and it'll take 15 or 20 games. And I think the best version of New York is to answer your question, I'm not worried about the Knicks. I think they're going to be really, really, really good. Something to keep an eye on. New York's maybe one of the only teams I'm not sweating in the NBA that have been disappointing.
So while we're on this topic, because you've been basically our Milwaukee Bucks beat columnist, you wrote about them for CBSSports.com. Teams that we have been worried about in the Eastern Conference include the Milwaukee Bucks, although they got a victory last night. So where did you land on this thing? And tell people about the story that you wrote.
That I hated watching that game, that I didn't want. It was such a, you guys are like, what? Oh, my buddy, like, what a night of hoops.
So many fun games you missed last night.
Yeah. I mean, look, they won the game. I didn't think they looked particularly impressive. The Raptors, I will not pretend to have watched. Oh my God. This is the first Raptors game I've watched from beginning to end. And there were moments where they made a run where they would get and I think they can't win this, right?
Can I give you a quick Raptors thing before you do the Bucks? So the Raptors have assembled this trio of Scotty Barnes and Quickly and RJ Barrett, right? And on paper, you're like, that could be something. I kind of like those three guys together. With those three, since they made the trade, they have played together 18 minutes over a possible 61 games.
Wow.
How is that even possible?
I don't know. It was really hard to focus on that game. I kept flipping to other games, but I had to write. So you know how that goes. Like I have to watch this Bucks game. Here's my takeaway. Yeah, and obviously we've talked about Giannis and could he be somewhere else, and I've reported about that, and other places have confirmed it, and so on and so forth. I know it sounds outrageous. It just felt like not a must-win game, but it's a game in November against the Toronto Raptors, and Milwaukee really needed to win that basketball game. I was just envisioning, if you find a way to lose to the Raptors, what Giannis is going to say about his teammates, or what the narrative is going to be, or the angst. Getting to 3-8 is not any kind of salvation. I don't think it changes the fit with Lillard, who's obviously out in concussion protocol. It doesn't solve the issues with Doc Rivers, he's been factually poor. He is well under 500 in his not quite 60 games coaching the Bucks, and it doesn't change the reality that Giannis turns 30 in December, and there is no flex at the second apron team, no assets, right? They need to be good enough that he wants to be there. However, sometimes winning can spark a change, and they have a really easy schedule the next 10 games. The next 10 games, they play one team that's over 500. That team is the Rockets. The rest of it's like Charlotte, Detroit, Atlanta, Miami, who obviously, they have they could
critical stretch.
I don't think that they're very good. And I don't think like the sort of comp would be the 9-8 Miami Heat from 2010. I do that because I covered that team where they were 9-8 and LeBron literally tried to get Spoelstra fired through Chris Broussard. It's a long time ago. And everybody, the sky was falling. All the doomsers, guilty, me, I did it, came out. And that team made the finals, lost that finals, won the next two, and made 4 in a row. Do I think that is the Milwaukee Bucks and Doc Rivers and Lillard and Giannis? I don't. But it doesn't matter what I think, right? It matters what Giannis thinks. And so you win 80 your next 2 against basically mediocre and bad teams other than the Rockets, and all of a sudden you're, what would you be, like 11-10? And at least you can shift the vibes, maybe create some positivity. Lillard should be back, obviously, by then from concussion protocol. So my takeaway is yesterday was a baby step. And they've only beat the teams they have beaten, Milwaukee this year, have a total. The 3 teams they have beaten have each won 2 games. The 3 teams they've beaten have 6 total wins.
Yeah, one of them was the Sixers.
One of them was your Sixers team when nobody played. One of them was who still aren't good, who still have 2 wins. So, the Bucks, look, I think that Giannis is likely to leave because other people have told me they think that's true. And I think Milwaukee is bad. But we do overreact to things, and things can change. And maybe this is the spark of a win streak against bad teams that shifts things a little bit.
It's an absolutely critical stretch for them. We'll see if they can pull this off. We're going to take a break. You mentioned LeBron trying to get Spo fired back in the day. I think Spo might want to fire himself after what happened last night, where the Heat gave a game away in an absolutely knucklehead moment that was part of this fun first night of the NBA Cup. We're going to talk about that game and also the Hawks stealing one in Boston. And then we're going to make the case not just for why the NBA Cup is good, but some ideas that we had last night in our group text. We'll get into those on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc.
Saturdays at 3:30. It's big time. Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Just a reminder, you can find us on YouTube. Over there, we are at Beyond the Arc CBS. We are live Monday through Friday at noon Eastern. Come and join us. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. All right, NBA Cup moments that happened last night, Bill. I don't know if you saw this or you watched the replay or whatever, but so it goes to overtime. And the Heat are up 2 with 1.1 seconds left in overtime. And the Pistons throw an alley-oop from Cunningham to Duren to tie the game, right? And Spoelstra pulls a Chris Webber and calls a timeout they don't have. And they make the free throws. The Pistons make the free throws. And that's how they won that game in the Cup game. Aaron, I think we have the sound from Spo afterwards, who was just like, he was just berating himself. He looked like he might cry, Bill.
JB just drew up a great play. We didn't have the backside protected. It was just a really well executed play, and then I just made a serious mental error, there at the end. That's on That's on me. I feel horrible about it. There's really no excuse for that. I'm 17 years in. We had talked about it in the huddle. I knew that we didn't have anything. I just got emotional and reactive on that, and I just made just a horrendous mistake there at the end. It's a shame, because we really fought back. We had some great defensive possessions, hustle possessions, those 50-50 balls, and then Tyler was just sensational. You don't want it to come down to a mental error like that. Yeah, you just would have liked to seen this go double overtime. That's the kind of game it felt like. It deserved to go double OT, and not have somebody get in the way of that. And unfortunately, even as a veteran coach, I got in the way of that.
Wow.
Poor Spo.
So I covered Spoelstra. I know Spoelstra.
Yeah.
I've never – also, let me add to his shame or embarrassment. He also tried to get Kevin Love into the game for that last play, and they didn't have possession. And it was just – Love was just walking – do you see that? Was just walking around like, I don't think – okay.
Yeah.
Can I give you my – on Reddit, the Am I an A-hole thread, which is amazing. Have you seen this?
I don't, but tell me
It's amazing. It's basically like you go on there and you ask people, oh, am I the a-hole? Like, I won't invite this is a recent one. I won't invite my mom to my wedding because she basically didn't speak to me for 20 years. Am I the a-hole? John, am I the a-hole here? I like
this is
Eric.
Going to be a new segment. I love this.
I like Eric a lot.
Yeah.
And he's the first head coach that I covered as a beat person, and he was really good to me. And all of that aside, and I can separate that, he's an amazing head coach, right?
Yes.
I think he's the best. But
universally regarded as a top 5 head coach.
In the last 2 years, he's become incredibly obnoxious to the media and press conferences. And he's become very condescending and very sort of trying to look for mistakes media members make, even in semantics. And I can remember Heat Nuggets, I think, in that finals where Ramona Shelburne is an excellent reporter, asked a very legitimate question, and Spo went at her because she misspoke on something. It's hard for me to have sympathy for a coach who wants to be exacting constantly and demand absolute perfection from people asking questions, some of whom are nervous on a microphone, and then to turn around and say, oh, I feel your emotion, your tears that you made a mistake. To get respect, you have to give respect. And so I like Eric Spoelstra. I know Eric. He's been really good to me. I don't have the same. I saw that clip and I thought, hey, man, maybe you should give some grace sometimes to people in much less powerful positions than you, since you now need to get some. He's still the best coach in the NBA. Nothing changes that. It's a terrible mistake, but that was my takeaways. Hey, Eric, people make mistakes and aren't always perfect, and I've seen you be exacting to folks for much, much less in the way of it. This isn't presented the way that I want. Maybe there's a little karma involved here.
I don't think there could be karma involved. I don't think that he's going to be looking for grace because he wouldn't, judging by that reaction, give it to himself. And were he on that Reddit thread, am I the a-hole? I think he would respond by saying, yes, I'm the guy. Like he was beating
Eric's the a-hole.
on. Yeah. He would be like, yes, I am. That's a really tough way to lose a game. It's a guaranteed Shaqtin' a Fool Hall of Fame moment. Really rough because you're thinking, like, despite the fact that the Pistons have been a little scrappy this year, you're thinking, at the very least, we're going double OT here.
The Pistons have been scrappy.
They have been scrappy. Yeah, they've been fun, but man, you just handed them a win. So that was one of the things that happened last night that was on our radar that was super fun, unless you're a Miami Heat fan or in this instance, Eric Spoelstra. Another one that happened, there's some sort of mental block with the Boston Celtics not being able to beat the Atlanta Hawks. This happened last year a couple times where you're like, how did they lose to the Hawks a couple times? Last night, Bill, the Hawks went to Boston, and that I'm interested to hear your take on the extremely green court that they had. The Hawks go to Boston. They win in Boston in the cup game. And by the way, Jalen Johnson was unbelievable. He had a triple-double. But Bill, no Trey, no Bogdan Bogdanovic, no Hunter. Like,
this was a G League team. Yeah. I am. So again, I did not watch this as closely as the other games because I was really ensconced in the magic of the Bucks not being able to cross 100 points against the worst defense in the NBA and still beating the Raptors. But yeah, and catching up. I don't know. Is this just? I mean, credit Atlanta and credit having a little bit of spirit. This feels kind of, if I can steal a comparison from the NFL, this feels like the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs know they're the best team in the NFL, and they play badly every week, and they're undefeated. And the Celtics, I think, know, certainly in the East sucks right now. And just in general, they're the best team in the NBA, and they've probably done games where it's 70 or 80% effort, and they've won nonetheless. And they just looked past Atlanta, and Atlanta played well, and I think it probably means absolutely nothing.
No, I mean, for the cup, it's fun, right? Because the Celtics are in the same group, whatever group letter that is, with the Cavs, and the Cavs are barreling towards potentially a 15-0 record when they meet next week on Wednesday. So that's super fun. But yeah, I think that, like, I'm not worried about the Celtics at all. And it's a good, fun win for the Hawks. The Hawks also have sort of exceeded expectations for me so far this season. And, you know, if they can do something, some of these teams that, you know, they're not going to produce anything in the playoffs, but some of these teams like the Hawks, if they could maybe go on a run in the cup, that also would buoy the importance of the cup, which we're going to discuss in a second.
Pacers last year were kind of in that mix, right? I mean, they were good.
Yeah, they were. Narrative-wise, the NBA got lucky with LeBron and the Lakers winning it, because I think if, like, the Pacers win it, people just go, oh, you know. But this way, like, you sort of establish a precedent. You said you liked I don't even know what you would call it. Nickelodeon lime green.
Amazing. Who doesn't want to put their shades on at night in order to watch an NBA game in their living room? Dude, last year too, I like the gaudiness. I like the ugliness. Here's what it is. I'm just glad that the NBA is leaning into the distinction of these games and the distinction of the cup. And last year, it felt like maybe you had to do the floors because nobody gave you know what. But as we talked about, the players care. Like, the players are actually being competitive, and they care, and the games are good. And in November, teams are fighting. And like, so like, it sort of jives with it fits with these crazy floors. And then, okay, this is a distinct separate thing that is legitimized, not just because I can't really look directly at the television because of the greenness of the screen, but because the players are actually into it. And so, yeah, I like the floors because I think it sort of speaks to this unique thing that's shockingly working.
From an aesthetic standpoint, I am totally cool with different floors. I'm just like, well, let's do different floors, but make them good. Is this hard?
I like gaudy. Sometimes you just need to just put it out, let it hang out there, NBA.
All right. Independent of the courts, I think the NBA, to answer the question posed here on the Chiron, I think the NBA Cup is good. And here's a couple of reasons why. The randomness on any given night. If it's just a Tuesday night last night and the Hawks beat the Celtics, we just shrug and we're on to Wednesday. Now, all of a sudden, you're like, oh, okay, well, in the Cup standings, this could be potentially important for the Hawks. You were saying guys are cared. Clearly, they do. They were a bunch of players were asked about it. Steph was talking about it last night. Kind of forces guys to compete on like any random specific night, right? Like, you have these nights where, hey, Tuesdays and Fridays are, you know, they're NBA players. They're competing hard anyway. But now there's like an extra added component where you're like, oh, this is a cup game. We're trying to raise our standings. And by the way, they stumbled onto something here with margin of victory, because we saw it happen last night. Knicks probably could have sat their guy. If it wasn't Tibbs, any other coach could have sat their guys later. Okay. But the Knicks wanted to try to run up the score a little bit, and the Sixers had to try to not let the score run up. So you've got your most important players on the floor.
Late point differential is significant.
Point differential. Yep. I love that component.
I do too. Also, can I add just to why, and I've talked to people, it's also, these guys care because they're competitors, but they don't always compete in November. I mean, you have to sort of pace yourself.
Yeah.
This thing is in Vegas.
Yes.
I mean, you get to go to Vegas, and the schedule, because I just booked, the games are Saturday and then Tuesday. There's a lot of time, if you earn your way to this thing, to also have a nice time in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of motivation to get to win, to hang out in Vegas, to hang out with the guys, I guess it's a banner.
The money, if you make it out of the group stage, you're guaranteed $50,000. If you make it to the semifinals and you lose, you're guaranteed $100,000. If you make it to the finals and lose, it's $200,000, and the winners get $500K. And I know, like, for max level players like Steph and LeBron or whatever, it's not a lot of money. If you're a veteran minimum guy, that's a significant chunk of your salary. If you're a rookie or a two-way player, that's a party. You can't believe how happy you are to win that money.
What is $500,000? 1% of a max player's earnings? I mean, if you make $100,000 as what does a superintendent in America make? $200,000? I mean, $2,000 to like go out. It's not nothing to those guys, right? I mean, it's not what it would be to us, but it's not $20 to us. Like it's some actual cash. And I think you said something that's really interesting and true. Like it also just like there's a way where the competitiveness can sort of, for teams that aren't going to win a championship, you can speed up, I think, the process of what it feels like to compete in games that matter. If you're a young team and you get into this thing, you have a number 1 draft pick, or you have a young core that's not quite the Thunder, this is an opportunity to just maybe speed up what it feels like to simulate as best you can playoff basketball or meaningful basketball to try to, get where you want to go a little bit quicker.
So 2 things that we were thinking about from the NBA Cup last night that we hit on from our
I love this
group chat with
you guys solved crack the puzzle.
Yeah. Okay. So one, for all the reasons we just mentioned, we love point differential, right? Because it's forcing guys to play late in games. And like that 65 game threshold for awards, that's kind of what the NBA was trying to do, right? You want your best players out there. Well, now late in games, guess what happens? Your best players are going to be out there because it's going to matter. So I think the NBA playoff tiebreaker, I don't know if you remember last year, because there's so many different tiebreakers, it starts with head-to-head record. Fine. If you want to keep that, that's okay. But there's a whole bunch of tiebreakers that come after that. The next tiebreaker after head-to-head for playoffs is division record, then conference record, then winning percentage, and on till you get to 6. 6 is where point differential comes in for actual playoffs, right? I say move point differential up to the number 2 slot because last year you had the division record, and in the Eastern Conference, the Magic, the Pacers, and the Sixers all finished with the same record. And by virtue of the Magic winning the absolute awful Southeast Division, they got the higher seed. Scrap that thing. It's so stupid. Nobody cares about divisions, but we're going to fix that in a second. You move point differential up, and now all of a sudden, point differential matters all season long. It's a great indicator of which teams are winners and which teams aren't. And it makes these players play late in games. I think it's a no-brainer.
I'm writing this down right now in my notes on my phone because I want to do a column now. How the NBA can fix ... I'll credit you and Aaron because I already have a plan to fix most improved player. If I told you this, you cannot, if you're most improved player, you can't have been an all NBA rookie player in the last 3 years, or you can't have had any, no more of these like some young guy who's really great. But anyway, I love this.
Yeah.
I love this as a way because the sort of, if you can get even a little bit teams, coaches, players to buy into the strategy of having to compete even when you're behind, because it could be significant, it leans into the very goal that Adam Silver has, one of his 2 goals, which is to make games more urgent regardless of when they're played or against whom they're played. I love it, dude.
It's an obvious idea. And this one, this second idea that we had, it wasn't my idea, is producer Aaron's idea, but it was so simple. It's genius. So we were talking about how the cup groups are randomized, right? And, wink and a nod, all of a sudden Klay ends up in the same group as the Golden State Warriors. But we were just discussing how divisions don't matter. Nobody cares about divisions. Literally for like 2 decades since I was in Dallas covering the Mavs, Mark Cuban has been saying scrap divisions. They don't matter. Nobody cares.
Because they're stupid.
But producer Aaron came up with a genius idea to make them matter. And here's how you do it. Just make the cup groups the divisions. Now, all of a sudden, if you get out of the division, if you got out of your group, that's because you won the division. You get bragging rights, and it actually makes the division stand for something. And it has the added luxury of you're already playing the teams in your division 4 times anyway, so it's easy for scheduling purposes.
Look, I'm literally writing this down while you're talking for when there's a slow week and I got to write something. And then
fix for the cup.
And then you suddenly have like division, right? Like then you can sort of start to keep track of how many divisions have won this thing. And maybe that lends a little bit of credence to now the division kind of matters as a historical entity.
How many times did you get out of the division, out of the group stage and get into the knockout round? Oh, we've got, we won the Atlantic Division. We made it to the semifinals of the cup, or we won a cup or whatever. Now, like you're hanging the banner, it means a little something more. I love this idea. And also,
Yeah, it's great.
The logistics of it. I know sometimes we don't care about that as fans or media people because the NBA is going to play the games that the NBA plays. But, in the preseason, teams schedule their own games. And LeBron was like, why are we getting on a plane to go to Milwaukee for a preseason game? This alleviates some of those concerns where you're like, these are already baked in. We don't have to worry about this.
Yeah, dude, it's it's an amazing. So now I got to think of 3 or 4 other ways to fix the NBA so I can do this column. Maybe I'll suggest going back to the 2-3-2 in the finals. For the Cup, I love it. And I think, by the way, if you can get this idea into the right place in New York, it is something that is doable. It is something that is possible because they want to be pretty forward looking. There's some breaking news. Do you mind if I give it to you?
Yeah,
it looks pretty significant from Shams. So according to Shams, Greg Popovich suffered a mild stroke on November 2nd.
Oh, no.
He's expected to make a full recovery, but a timeline has not been determined. So there was, by the way, credit to Shams because there have been some competing reporting out there about what had gone on with Popovich. And if I remember right, Shams had said this is more serious than has been reported in some other spots. And obviously it is. So I'm glad. I guess the good news here is full recovery expected. That's scary.
It is scary. I mean, he's in his 70s, and he's obviously a pretty animated guy, and we want to have him around for any number of reasons. But yeah, that's a shame. So yeah, prayers for Pop, man, for sure.
For sure.
It's a weird way to transition to the end of the show.
Sorry,
here.
it is a downer.
No, I mean,
the good news is, I guess if he had a stroke, he had a stroke, whether we knew it or not. And the great news is full recovery expected. That's not always the case. That is the good news here.
That is a good thing. We're thinking about Pop because he's a treasure, man. We've talked about him on this show about, he has that reputation for being gruff and, going at media members and like being a little ornery. I love that. He's just like, he's one of the smartest guys I've ever gotten to talk to. He's got a mind that is just like, it's not just about basketball, right? Like you put the quarter in with Pop on any subject not involving basketball that he's engaged in, politics or world affairs or wine military. History. Yep. He's
I've been on the receiving end of his gruffness as it relates to his views of fashion. So it's, he's an interesting guy. Yes,
get back soon, Pop. Team of the night for you, Bill. Let's wrap it up.
It's an easy one, but I'm going to go Atlanta, and I'll just throw this stat at you that sort of jumped out to me. With basically a skeleton crew of players for that Atlanta team, not only did they obviously beat Boston, they were 6.5-point dogs. So if you measure it by against the spread victories, it is the 4th most surprising, shocking upset in history at the Garden, at the TD Garden in Boston. It is a historical level of a win. So I'll give Atlanta some little credit, little love for a very, very impressive win.
They deserve it
on the green floor that you loved.
The Celtics have like I said, a weird mental block when it comes to the Hawks. I'm going to go a little tongue in cheek here and go with the aforementioned Heat going full Chris Webber, Eric Spoelstra. I mean, look, I know that he's beaten himself up and he's never going to forgive it. And the rest of us are never going to forget it. And we're always going to remember it. But come on, that was a really funny way to end a basketball game. And everybody was talking about it on social media. We mentioned that we're building a basketball community over at Blue Sky. Everybody was laughing about it. I know Spo's not laughing about it, but it was very interesting. Producer Aaron, I was thinking about this. It was hilarious. I think we need to do like a team of the night leaderboard. Some of these aren't like earnest. Like you did a real one. You did a real one where you're like you're positively giving.
But I've done some negative ones.
I know we've done some tongue in cheek, but I think we need a team of the night leaderboard to see who's fallen on this thing.
Copy. I like it. I like it. I'm on it.
If we do that, do you know how many times I'm going to put the Bucks on there out of pure sarcasm just to put them on the ring? They didn't play. They still lost 4 in a row. Bucks.
We're fixing all kinds of stuff. We're fixing the NBA Cup. We're fixing Team of the Night. It's been a banner day for us. I think that's going to do it, though. Tomorrow, Bill will be back. As I mentioned, we'll get into all the action from tonight's schedule, and then we'll also do some early season apologies, things that we got wrong, a little mea culpa on a Thursday. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, I am John Gonzalez. We thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.